Good morning, Sarah. Thank you for taking the time to interview with us today. I'm Michael Rodriguez, Director of Supply Chain Operations. I've reviewed your background as an operations coordinator, and I'm excited to discuss your interest in transitioning to our Senior Supply Chain Analyst role.
Good morning, Michael. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm really excited about the possibility of advancing into supply chain analysis and contributing to more strategic initiatives.
Excellent. Before we dive in, could you give me a brief overview of your current role and what motivated you to apply for this analyst position?
Certainly. In my current role as operations coordinator, I've been managing day-to-day logistics operations, coordinating with suppliers, and ensuring smooth material flow. Over the past 3 years, I've become increasingly interested in the analytical side of supply chain management, understanding the data patterns, identifying optimization opportunities, and making strategic recommendations rather than just executing operational tasks.
That's a great foundation. Let's dive deeper into your experience. Can you walk me through a specific project where you had to analyze supply chain data to solve a problem?
Absolutely. About 6 months ago, we were experiencing frequent stockouts of key components, despite having what appeared to be adequate safety stock levels. I took the initiative to analyze our demand patterns over the past 18 months, looking at seasonality, lead time variability, and supplier performance metrics. I discovered that our safety stock calculations weren't accounting for the 15% increase in demand volatility we'd experienced post-pandemic. I recommended adjusting our safety stock formula and implementing a more dynamic reorder point system, which reduced stockouts by 40% while only increasing carrying costs by 8%.
Impressive initiative. What tools and methodologies did you use for that analysis?
I primarily used Excel for the initial data extraction and analysis, creating pivot tables and statistical models to identify trends. I also used our ERP system's reporting capabilities to pull historical data. For the statistical analysis, I applied basic forecasting methods, including moving averages and exponential smoothing. I know that as a senior analyst, I'd need to expand my toolkit to include more sophisticated software like R, Python, or advanced supply chain planning systems.
That's exactly the kind of analytical thinking we're looking for. Now, let's talk about your understanding of supply chain metrics. What KPIs do you think are most critical for measuring supply chain performance?
From my experience, I believe there are several tiers of metrics. At the operational level, we need to track fill rates, on-time delivery, inventory turns, and order accuracy. At the strategic level, I'd focus on total cost of ownership, cash-to-cash cycle time, and supplier performance scorecards. What I've learned is that no single metric tells the whole story. You need a balanced scorecard approach that considers cost, quality, delivery, and flexibility.
Let's get into some technical scenarios. Imagine you're analyzing a supplier who has a 95% on-time delivery rate, but whose deliveries are highly variable, sometimes early, sometimes late. How would you approach this situation?
That's a great question because it highlights the difference between accuracy and precision. A 95% on-time rate sounds good, but high variability can be just as disruptive as poor performance. I'd first quantify the variability by calculating the standard deviation of delivery times and analyzing the distribution pattern. Then I'd assess the business impact. Early deliveries might increase carrying costs, while late deliveries could cause stockouts. I'd work with the supplier to understand root causes of variability and potentially implement a supplier development program focusing on process standardization and capacity planning.
Good approach. Now, let's say you need to optimize inventory levels across multiple SKUs with different demand patterns and lead times. Walk me through your methodology.
I'd start with an ABC analysis to prioritize SKUs based on their contribution to revenue and cost. For A items, I'd use more sophisticated forecasting methods and potentially implement a continuous review system. For B and C items, I might use simpler periodic review systems. I'd segment SKUs by demand patterns, fast-moving versus slow-moving, seasonal versus steady, and apply appropriate inventory models. For each segment, I'd calculate optimal reorder points and order quantities using economic order quantity principles, adjusted for service level requirements and carrying costs.
Excellent. How would you handle a situation where you have conflicting objectives? For example, finance wants to minimize inventory investment, while sales wants to maximize product availability.
This is where analytical rigor becomes crucial. I'd start by quantifying the trade-offs using a cost-benefit analysis. I'd calculate the cost of stockouts, lost sales, customer dissatisfaction, expediting costs, versus the cost of carrying additional inventory. I'd then model different scenarios showing how various service levels impact both inventory investment and business performance. The key is presenting data-driven recommendations that show the optimal balance point, along with sensitivity analysis showing how changes in key variables affect outcomes.
Let's shift to strategic thinking. How do you see supply chain analytics evolving in the next 3 to 5 years?
I see several major trends. First, the integration of AI and machine learning will enable more sophisticated demand forecasting and predictive analytics. We'll move from reactive to predictive supply chain management. Second, real-time visibility will become table stakes. Companies will need end-to-end supply chain transparency. Third, sustainability metrics will become as important as traditional cost and service metrics. Finally, supply chain resilience will be a key focus, with analytics helping companies build more robust, flexible networks that can adapt to disruptions.
Speaking of disruptions, how would you design an analytical framework to assess supply chain risk?
I'd create a multi-dimensional risk assessment framework. First, I'd identify risk categories: supplier risks, demand risks, operational risks, and external risks like natural disasters or geopolitical events. For each category, I'd define specific risk indicators and establish monitoring thresholds. I'd use probability impact matrices to prioritize risks and develop risk scores for different supply chain scenarios. The framework would include both quantitative metrics, like supplier financial health scores, and qualitative assessments. Most importantly, I'd build scenario planning capabilities to model how different risk events might cascade through the supply chain.
How would you approach building a business case for supply chain technology investments?
I'd structure the business case around 3 pillars: cost reduction, revenue enhancement, and risk mitigation. For cost reduction, I'd quantify savings from improved efficiency, reduced inventory, and lower operational costs. For revenue enhancement, I'd calculate the value of improved customer service levels and faster time to market. For risk mitigation, I'd estimate the cost of avoided disruptions and compliance issues. I'd use NPV analysis to evaluate the investment over its life cycle, include sensitivity analysis to show how results change under different assumptions, and develop clear ROI timelines with measurable milestones.
As a senior analyst, you'll need to influence stakeholders across the organization. Can you give me an example of a time when you had to convince someone to adopt a recommendation they initially resisted?
Certainly. In my current role, I recommended changing our supplier evaluation criteria to include sustainability metrics, not just cost and quality. Our procurement team was initially resistant, worried about increased costs and complexity. I addressed their concerns by conducting a pilot program with 3 suppliers, showing that sustainable practices often correlate with operational efficiency. I presented the data showing that our sustainable suppliers had 20% better on-time delivery and 15% fewer quality issues. I also highlighted the risk mitigation benefits and growing customer demand for sustainable products. By framing sustainability as a business advantage rather than just a cost, I got buy-in for the expanded evaluation framework.
How do you ensure your analytical insights translate into actionable business decisions?
I've learned that great analysis is only valuable if it drives action. I always start by understanding the decision-maker's perspective and constraints. I present findings in business terms, not just technical metrics. I structure recommendations with clear next steps, responsible parties, and timelines. I also try to anticipate objections and prepare supporting data. Most importantly, I follow up to track implementation and measure results, which builds credibility for future recommendations.
What supply chain challenges do you think will be most critical for companies in our industry over the next 2 years?
I see several key challenges. First, supply chain visibility remains a major issue. Many companies still lack real-time insight into their extended supply networks. Second, the shift toward more regionalized supply chains will require new analytical approaches to optimize network design. Third, sustainability reporting requirements are increasing, so companies need better systems to track and analyze environmental impact. Fourth, talent shortage in supply chain analytics is creating a competitive disadvantage for companies that can't attract and retain skilled professionals.
How do you stay current with supply chain trends and best practices?
I'm a member of APIX and regularly attend their webinars and conferences. I subscribe to Supply Chain Management Review and follow several industry thought leaders on LinkedIn. I've also been taking online courses in data analytics and supply chain optimization. I find that the best insights often come from cross-industry learning. Understanding how other industries solve similar problems can spark innovative solutions.
What questions do you have about this role or our organization?
I'm curious about the team's structure and how this role would collaborate with other departments. Also, what are the biggest analytical challenges the supply chain team is currently facing? And what opportunities do you see for professional development in this role?
Great questions. You'd be working closely with our procurement, logistics, and demand planning teams, as well as interfacing with finance and sales. Our biggest challenge right now is integrating data from multiple systems to create a single source of truth for supply chain decisions. For development, we have a strong partnership with local universities for continuing education and encourage conference attendance and professional certifications.
That sounds like exactly the kind of environment where I could contribute immediately while continuing to grow my skills.
Excellent. Sarah, thank you for your time today. Your combination of operational experience and analytical thinking is exactly what we're looking for in this role. We should have a decision by early next week, and I'll be in touch regardless of the outcome.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very excited about this opportunity and look forward to hearing from you.
If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means a lot.